Another lovely morning. A bit frosty. I've come up the hill this time, so you haven't got to listen to me pant up the hill, but I'm still going to pant. I want to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. I've touched on it before, but also about ego in photography, which applies to everything else from art to whatever workspace, people in general. Ego's a strange thing, and I've been very lucky in my life to have met some extremely well-known, talented and famous photographers. And I haven't met one yet with ego. None at all. One of the things that made me think about this today was I was thinking about a photo walk I led in London for a company, and the interesting fact is that it was a bit of a chaotic day. It was one of the first times they'd done this particular photo walk in London, and it wasn't overly brilliantly organised, but hundreds of people turned up. It was very successful, but it did mean a little bit of running around for the what you might call the talent, the people that are leading the walks, etc. Because of the bad organisation. I think today it's really, really good. So I don't want to knock it and say their name, but anyway. On a bench, when I was just about to start a photo walk, was a guy sitting down, really quiet guy. He wasn't speaking to anyone really, just sitting quietly, looking and watching. Our eyes met. I realised who it was. I didn't say anything to him, and then I carried on with what I was doing. Probably famously in one of my moods where things weren't quite going right, and I'm trying to make the best of the best situation. But one of the reasons I didn't speak to him was I didn't want to highlight who he was and detract from his enjoyment of the day. It felt a little tiny bit like myself. I didn't handle being well known in photography for one main reason, and that is I thought I was shit. I didn't think I was very good at photography. I don't think I've got a good enough body of work to be known as a photographer, and I'm always striving to get better and better and better. Now, this particular photographer was Thomas Heaton. It didn't take long before someone realised who it was and attached themselves to him. Now, I don't know whether he was expecting that or not in that stage, but I do know that sometimes you just want to be left alone, but sometimes you can't. And don't get me wrong, just like a film star, when you're famous and you're building a brand, you want the media, you want the press, and you want the people to know you to help you build the brand to get sales. But you don't know what you're doing. You don't know where that's going to go. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the Dunning-Kruger effect, becoming famous in photography, and what that really means, and why sometimes it doesn't mean anything in this day and age, because people game algorithms. There's some people now on Instagram with 200,000 or 300,000 followers teaching workshops. Their actual work and their ideas are mediocre, and 90% of it's copied from other people. So when I get a chance to get back and sit down, I'm going to try and put something together about that and just tell you my thoughts on it. So I'm back from my refreshing walk this morning, and where do I start? It's a very difficult one. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, I've explained it before, and please look it up. One of the reasons I don't put a lot of things on these videos is because I want people to go away and look them up. If I put slides on here and show other people's work and other people's pictures and my pictures, what it happens is you watch the YouTube, look at the pictures, you look at the things like the Dunning-Kruger effect graph, etc. And then that's it. You've taken it in, you go away. And one of the things I've learned by even looking at YouTube is YouTube's a very good training tool, but it's not very good because that's all you watch. And then you might go on to another video and another video. But if you walk away from it and you go and buy someone's book, or you look into someone's work, you start to follow them, and you start to follow what they do, or read their books and look at their work, and then you start to study, a bit like people that go to university, etc. Now, studying is a very interesting thing, which I'll come on to probably in later videos, but let's just look at the Dunning-Kruger effect quickly. So when someone first does anything, and let's just use welding as an example. When someone does their first ever weld, unless they've had really good instruction, or even if they have had really good instruction, their first weld shit. Now let's just take that away. Maybe they haven't had instruction and they do stick welding first of all. or MIG welding or whatever, and they try it themselves. They don't understand anything about it at all. And by doing a MIG weld or a stick weld, they don't understand that the slag builds up on a stick weld and you've got to knock it off and then probably clean it up. And they don't understand a lot about MIG welding and the gases and everything else. And then let alone getting onto TIG welding and gas welding, etc., etc., etc. It's an absolute minefield. Some people though will do a weld and think it's the best weld in the world. They think it's absolutely fantastic until one day they meet that guy that welds offshore powerboat tanks in aluminium with a continuous weld for hours on end to get it perfect. And when they look at that, they'll realise they're absolutely shite. Well, some people do. Some people will not refuse to say that their welding shit when their welding is shit. But the only way you can improve and learn and get on is to realise your shit and take steps to do something about it. Now, by taking steps to do something about it and trusting in the people that you're getting advice from, you're going to get better and learn. It's the same as painting. I've seen some, I draw now and I know it's shit, right? But art's completely different in a way. And people say it's subjective and they're like they do photography. But to be honest with you, it's a bloody excuse for shit work. Now, to be creative and everything else in this, as I say, there's no such thing as unique thought. And to a certain extent, there isn't. It's all been done before. It's all been thought of before. It's very, very rare something new comes along. When someone does hit on that new piece of unique thought, it gets hundreds of millions of hits on YouTube or photography or art or everything else, and everyone wants to know about it, but it's really, 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 really rare. Now, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a perfect example of that. It's been explored on YouTube before. I've mentioned it in bits and pieces, but those people that have just picked up a camera, got it out of the box, that think they're the world's best photographer, need to have a bloody good word with themselves, right? Especially as they're the ones that go on YouTube, they go on Instagram and all the other photography sites, and they slag off everyone else and they say, you're all fucking shit, I'm the best photographer in the world, I'm brilliant. Well, you're not. You're just not. And you can tell because their ego grows and grows and grows and grows with social media. And then they get an averagely almost nice photograph by luck, and that's their best photograph. They could even win a competition with it. They're still a shit photographer. They've still got a lot to learn. You can't just do this in 5 minutes when you get a camera out of the box. You can't just be a welder when you do your first weld. You can't be the world's best painter when you've done your first sketch. You just can't. That brings me on to the likes of Tom Stoddard, and I'll start with Tom. Tom was the most, and I like to regard Tom as a friend. He was the most humble guy I've ever met. His photography is amazing. He's amazing. He came and talked to me at some photography festivals I've done. And I know he talks for other people, or used to talk for other people at photography festivals. And his fee was so minuscule because he loved to do it and he loved to help others. Now, in Tom's last years, Tom had cancer. He didn't tell anyone, not even most of his closest friends. He just kept it to his family. And that was very telling because he spent a lot of time on his last year of his life helping a friend of mine, Matt Walkley. By helping Matt and helping Matt to improve his work and everything else, Tom was so humble, but he spent all his time helping people. No one knew he was dying. So in his dying year, he had cancer for quite a while and he kept it quiet, but all the time he was ill and he kept it quiet. He was still talking at exhibitions, helping people like Matt, helping other people, doing all these amazing things, still doing his work, printing his work, putting his work out there, talking. And no one knew. He wasn't on social media going, look at me, aren't I amazing, aren't I famous, this, that and the other. No, he was just a really, really humble guy. A lot of photographers I've met who are really, really good at what they do and very humble. Now, some of them are famous, some of them are not. Some of them are sort of famous, but they've got loads of books and loads of work, but a lot of people don't know about them. Vivian Mayer is a very, very interesting one. She's the one that everyone puts on a pedestal, but her work wasn't even known until she had died. So years after she had died, she became known. So there was no ego there. She probably didn't even want her work to be shown. And we don't know to this day if she did. So all the people shouting and screaming about Vivian and Vivian this, Vivian that, Vivian may not have even wanted people to see her work. I wonder what she would have felt about people seeing her work now. She was definitely humble. There's all sorts of photographers now. As I've spoken about Thomas Heaton when I was out walking, Thomas is a completely different character off YouTube than he is on YouTube. Now, I've never met and had a really conversation with Thomas at all. Our eyes met once on an event in London, as I said. But I know there's a different Thomas a different Thomas online. The same as many of the YouTube photographers online. You get this perception, and famous people, you think you know them because of what you see on YouTube. And I've heard many a times people say, and I'm not going to drop names here, but I've heard many a times people say, if only he was like he was on YouTube, off YouTube, and said the things he does. But I tell you now, he can't. And I'm not. This isn't about Thomas, by the way. It's about someone else. But people can't go on YouTube and say it how it is. I can, because I don't give a shit. But they can't. If they actually said about the industry the way it is and the way things are, they probably wouldn't have the following they have, because the negativity and everything else would destroy their channels. But I think you have to tell the truth. I think you have to tell it how it is. And this isn't about brands and cameras and everything else. It's about your work. And you have to do a lot of work in the trenches, as someone once told me, before you can become a great photographer. I think David Naughton said it as well. You've got to go out and photograph and photograph and photograph, as I said yesterday, and learn to be a photographer before you can shout from the rooftops that you are one. I said to you, I don't rate my work and I don't see myself as a great photographer because I haven't got the bodies of work of some of the greats. I haven't been off to war to do war photography. I haven't done a lot of those things. I've taken thousands and thousands of photographs. So I'm a proficient photographer. I've been a professional photographer. I don't believe, I have got a lot of work, which I could call different bodies of work for different projects, but I don't believe I've created anything yet great. Now, I'm not going to go through loads of name dropping of photographers that I know of and met. I just want you to understand that all of the ones I've met who are famous are humble. And let's talk about Kevin Mullins for a minute. Kevin Mullins is one of the guys that talked me into working with Fujifilm and talking on stage for a living, right? I had hardly met Kevin before he'd done that. And he said, yeah, do it, just go for it, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was terrified of getting up on stage. Stage fright isn't the only thing. I've got IBS. It caused great problems to get on there. IBS and anxiety to go together to get me on a stage to talk to a load of people is an absolute thing to overcome. And I'd spoken on stage for a few times, this, that and the other, and I was never getting used to it. But I was at an event one day with Kevin, and I'd known Kevin by then, and we'd been for drinks and everything else, and we talked all the time. And I watched Kevin before he went on, physically shaking and nervous and scared. And I went, bloody hell, mate, you're just as scared as I am. And he went, yeah, but I wanted you to experience that. Do you know what I mean? So he's a really, really humble guy. I think he's a great wedding photographer. I think he's actually a great photographer if you look at his street stuff. He's very, very good explaining things in workshops and courses. And has he got bodies of work yet in street photography to make him well known and famous? No, probably not. But I bet you he's working on it. And he knows that, right? Because he is that type of guy. He might even write something underneath here if he sees it, but he is that type of guy that wants to discover something. I think his wedding photography is fantastic. I don't think some of the brides even know how good it is. And I'd look at other wedding photographers and I don't think their work's all that. It's just a cheap gimmick way of taking photographs to give them to people to go away, because most brides don't have a clue what photography is and how good a photographer needs to be to photograph their wedding. They just go for a recommendation from a friend, and then it's all about how the person behaves on the day and makes you feel. I mean, Lee Glasgow, for instance, was an absolutely brilliant wedding photographer, especially as his communication with brides and everything else. So I've watched people come along like Claire Armitage, who's gone out and done projects and done some great stuff. And I bet if you talk to her, she doesn't rate herself at all. I've seen some people on Instagram coming up now slowly, but the people that jump ahead, the people that game the algorithms, the people that tell you how good they are, the people that are out there. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were both looking at some of the new people on Instagram. They haven't even got bodies of work. They haven't got anything. They've just got loads of stuff they churn out in high contrast light, because that's what people want to see. What people want to see and what you can create as a photographer are two different things. And I hope to explore that over the coming years, especially with my own work, and explain that in different ways. So the fame game, chasing the fame, the ego doesn't work in photography. It doesn't work in welding, doesn't work in most business workplaces. Everyone just thinks you're a dick if you go, look at me, I'm great. But you're not great, are you? Look at your welding, it's shit, right? You know, an apprentice will think they're the best apprentice in the whole world until you point out to them they haven't got a bloody clue what they're doing. Once they've done 10 years and they've learned all the tricks in the trade, in whatever it is, from being a mechanic to a painter to everything else, then they start to learn. I'm 60. I've been photographing since I was 8 years old. I think I'm only just starting to know what I want to do. Doing this even, and doing projects on Instagram, sort of detracts from what I want to do. But that's something we'll explore in the future. I just wanted to touch on ego and everything. I didn't want to name drop too many photographers. There's lots of photographers that have come up by working algorithms and working YouTube to become something, and none of the people I've named, who are totally different offline, who are very relevant. The worst thing is being relevant and having something to say and keeping going. Unfortunately for YouTube, is you need content. The internet is content hungry. To be famous on YouTube, to be famous in anything, you need to churn out content. Tons and tons and tons of it. And the worst thing with churning out content is the quality drops. You're just doing it for the viewer. And once you start getting to that stage where you're just doing it for the viewer, you lose contact with your own soul of what you want to do. Now, when I worked for Fujifilm and I did stuff for other companies, I lost that a little bit. So when I left, and obviously had a stroke when I left, so everything stopped for me. But now I'm starting to go back and think, what do I want to do and what I want to do for me? And even doing this, talking to you, and even going back on Instagram, I'm detracting from what I may need to do. I had long, deep conversations with Matt Walkley and a load of other people at one point in time. And that's another thing. The great photographers will get together in a bar, have a drink, and talk about photography. From Tom Stoddard to everyone else. We've all sat in bars in Hull when the Hull Photography Festival's been on. All sat round, some really, really well-known photographers sat down and had long, deep, meaningful conversations about photography from the past, the future, and where it's going, and about our own work. We collaborate, we talk. And that's mostly videographers these days that do that. Photographers are really, really scared to sit down and talk to other people. And the ones that are the most scared are the ones that have got the most shit work. The ones that are really good are actually happy to sit down and have a really, really good conversation with each other, because they're not scared of each other. They're not scared of each other's work because they're all a little bit unique. They're all a little bit fantastic. I remember talking to all different people about Peter Dench one day, and I love Peter and I love Peter's work. But some people will say it's a bit like this and it's a bit like that, and in the past, and he doesn't relevant and he does this. But he's not. Peter's Peter. If you look at Peter and Peter's style and the way Peter talks about it, and he's definitely a humble guy. It's very, very interesting how people have an opinion. But most of these people that have an opinion haven't got a bloody clue what they're talking about. And that's really very, very relevant for today. Anyhow, I'll leave you with that. I'll come up with some more thoughts and I'll drop them as soon as I can. Take care. Have a great week.